The dust of Dry Creek drifted like smoke across the main road, settling over the boots of men who'd seen too many hard years and too little kindness. The saloon doors creaked open, and the noise inside dimmed. Every head turned when he walked in, a broad-shouldered cowboy with the look of a man who'd been to the edge of life and come back with scars instead of words. His name was Jace Rourke, a rancher known for keeping to himself, the kind of man who spoke little but worked harder than anyone in the territory. That night, though, he hadn't come for whiskey or cards. He'd come because he'd heard a rumor that a young woman was being auctioned off by the local outlaw gang to pay her dead father's debt. Her name was Evelyn, and when they brought her out, the crowd's laughter died. She wasn't a woman broken by circumstance, not yet. Her chin was lifted, her eyes fierce despite the rope on her wrists. There was defiance in her silence, a spark that said she'd rather die than beg. The outlaw leading the auction spat in the dust and called for bids. Men muttered, some laughed, but no one stepped forward. Jace watched her for a long time, the way she stood straight, refusing to cry, as if dignity was the only thing she had left. Then he heard her whisper, her voice trembling but steady enough to carry, "You paid for me. Now do it. Whatever you came to do, just don't let them touch me again." The words cut through the silence. She thought he was one of them. Jace's jaw tightened. He didn't correct her, not yet. Instead, he reached into his coat, tossed a gold coin onto the table, and said, "I'll take her." The outlaw's grin widened. "She's yours, cowboy." The rope was cut, and before Evelyn could understand what had just happened, Jace wrapped his coat around her shoulders and led her out into the cold night. Outside, the moonlight fell across her face, bruised, pale, and stubbornly beautiful. "Why?" she asked him. "Why buy me?" Jace didn't answer right away. He led her to his horse, lifted her gently into the saddle, and said, "Because no woman deserves to be sold." He mounted behind her and rode out of Dry Creek without looking back. The road was silent except for the sound of hooves and the soft wind moving through the canyon. Evelyn didn't trust him, but for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel hunted. By dawn, they reached the edge of his land, Rourke Ranch, a lonely stretch of prairie where the horizon met the sky. He dismounted, helped her down, and handed her a canteen. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "You can stay until you decide what comes next." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "And what do you want in return?" Jace met her gaze. Nothing. She didn't believe him, not yet. The world she knew didn't give kindness freely. Still, she followed him inside the small cabin. There was warmth there, a fire burning, coffee brewing, and something she hadn't felt in months, safety. As the hours passed, she learned little about him. He didn't ask questions or share much, but when he spoke, his words carried weight. She noticed the scars on his hands, the tiredness in his eyes, the look of a man who'd lost more than he'd ever admit. That night, when thunder rolled over the plains, Evelyn woke from a nightmare, screaming. Jace rushed in, steadying her shoulders. She pushed him away, shouting, "Don't touch me!" His voice came low, calm. "Ain't nobody gonna hurt you here." He stepped back, giving her space. She saw something in his face, not pity, but understanding. Days turned into weeks. Evelyn began to help around the ranch, feeding the horses, mending fences, learning to ride again. Her laughter came back slowly, awkwardly, like a forgotten tune. Jace pretended not to notice, but every time he saw her smile, something inside him eased. The townsfolk whispered, "Of course." They said he'd bought himself a bride. They said she was payment for something unholy. But Evelyn held her head high when she went to town, and Jace never corrected the rumors. Maybe because the truth, that he'd done it simply to save her, felt too fragile to explain. One evening, as the sun dipped red behind the hills, Evelyn stood on the porch watching the sky burn gold. Jace joined her, quiet as always. She turned to him and said, "You could have left me there. Why didn't you?" He looked at her, the brim of his hat shadowing his eyes. "Because I've seen too much of what men can do. I couldn't be one more of them." She studied him, then whispered, "Then maybe you're the only man I'll ever trust." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was full of something unspoken, something growing between them that neither could name. The world outside was still hard and cruel, but inside that cabin, a new story was being written, one not of ownership or debt, but of redemption, respect, and a love that came quietly, like dawn after a long storm. And that night, as she sat by the fire, Evelyn realized the truth. She hadn't been bought. She'd been saved. And in saving her, Jace Rourke had unknowingly found something he'd stopped believing in long ago. A reason to live. And perhaps, someday, a reason to love. As the screen fades to black, the narrator's voice could say, the days after the gunfight were quiet. The kind of quiet that settles heavy on the land when danger's only sleeping. The ranch stood scarred but standing, and the wind carried the scent of new rain over the fields. The woman he'd freed moved through her chores with the calm of someone learning what peace felt like for the first time. The cowboy kept to his work, eyes on the horizon, hands never idle. Between them, words were few, but every glance held what neither dared to say. He'd seen too much of the world's cruelty to believe in peace, and she'd endured too much to believe in kindness. Yet somehow, both began to hope again. One morning, the sound of hooves shattered the stillness. Sheriff Briggs rode in, slow, dust trailing behind him like smoke. "Got news, Dalton," he said, pulling a paper from his coat. "The man you crossed says you stole his property. He's taking it up with the marshal." The cowboy's jaw clenched. "She ain't property," he said flatly. Briggs shifted in the saddle. "You know how law reads out here." "No paper says otherwise. They'll come for her." The sheriff rode off, leaving silence in his wake. The woman stood behind the door, her heart pounding, fear twisting back through her like old roots. That night, the fire burned low, throwing shadows on the walls. He sat staring into the flames, the old guilt rising again, the lives he'd failed to save, the blood he couldn't wash off. She walked over quietly, her voice soft but firm. "You can't fight them all," she said. He looked up, eyes dark as storm clouds. "Ain't about fighting," he murmured. "It's about standing." She reached out, resting her hand over his. "Then I'll stand with you." For the first time, he let his guard fall, just enough for the light to reach him. When dawn came, they rode into Dust Creek together. The saloon doors swung wide and the room went silent. The man from the auction stood waiting, waving a crumpled contract like a weapon. "Law says she's mine," he spat. The cowboy stepped forward, steady as stone. "Law's wrong." But before he could say more, the woman's voice cut through the room. "You sold me once. You don't own what you gave away." Her words froze the air. Even the sheriff couldn't meet her eyes. The cowboy pulled a folded deed from his coat. "You want payment? Take this ranch. But her freedom stays hers." The man sneered, then hesitated. Greed flickered, then fear. He grabbed the paper and stormed out, muttering curses that vanished into dust. The room stayed silent until someone whispered, "Guess she's free now." The cowboy turned, meeting her gaze. No words, just that quiet understanding between two souls that had earned the right to breathe again. On the ride home, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in fire and gold. He stopped at the ridge overlooking the plains, the wind tugging at his coat. From his pocket, he pulled a small band of silver, worn but shining in the fading light. "Ain't no preacher here," he said softly. "But if you'll have me, I'll be yours till the dust takes me." She looked at him, tears glinting like stars. "Then I'm home," she whispered. That night, laughter echoed across the open land, light, fragile, but real. In town, they'd call it scandal. Out here, it was something holier. Two broken hearts finding faith again beneath the same sky. And if you're still listening, remember, out where the wind never rests, redemption rides beside the brave. Hit subscribe, saddle up, and ride with us again in the next Wild West story, because every scar in this land has a story worth telling.